Charlie Kirk, a figurehead of Christians and conservatives, a champion of debate, was shot and killed Wednesday. This is a sad time for America and truth. We will get into that and more today. This is the Yokel Idaho Midweek Report, where we give you an overview of the news you need to know in Idaho for the last week. Before we get to Mr. Charlie Kirk, I will say later on in the episode we will be reporting on an update to the Victor Perez shooting case. We'll also look at a strike that is halting road work in Northern Idaho, and Cracker Barrel's completely giving in and accepting defeat to customers. To get full coverage on these important stories and much more, go to our website. And to ensure you're the most informed Idahoan in the room, hit that subscribe button. Now, let's continue with the episode. As you all probably know, our nation witnessed something that should never happen in America. Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old founder of Turning Point USA, was gunned down while speaking to students at the Utah Valley University. A single shot fired 150 yards away ended the life of a young man who spent his career encouraging young people to engage in civil debate. The shockwave hit Idaho immediately. Within hours, hundreds gathered at our Capitol steps for a candlelight vigil. Idahoans sang hymns, shared stories about how Kirk had impacted local conservative youth, and prayed for his family. Governor Brad Little called it, quote, cowardly, an attack on free speech. While Senator Mike Crapo remembered Kirk as someone who, quote, promoted open dialogue, invited conversation from people of all backgrounds, end quote. But even in our grief, we saw some ugly division here in Idaho, tearing on our country's soul. The peaceful vigil turned violent when a man rode through on a scooter, screaming obscenities about Kirk. What followed was a brawl that required police intervention. One vigil attendee had to help break up the fight, later saying, quote, Charlie stood as a Christian man, and as Christians, we do not support violence, end quote. Even worse, we learned about a West Ada School District employee who posted a video celebrating Kirk's murder. And also another one I think that's circulating around for BSU, but I can't remember the name of that one. The district rightfully fired this person, but it shows how poisoned our public discourse has become. Meanwhile, President Trump ordered flags at half staff and promised to award Kirk the Presidential Medal of Honor posthumously. And then in conclusion, and normally I try to make these things very concise for you, the listener and viewer, because we usually have a lot of stories and you've got limited time, but a little bit of my personal experience. I actually got to meet Charlie Kirk at a Lincoln Day a couple of years back, just when I was getting started in politics, and to have a little bit of a conversation there. And one of the fundamental things I would say that came from that interaction and conversation, independent of if you liked or hated the guy, agreed or disagreed with his viewpoints, is that he was wonderful at listening, that he could sit there and I was able to articulate certain positions, and sometimes they were better or worse than others. I hope I've gotten better over the years. But he was able to perfectly understand and say them back to me exactly as I meant them, maybe sometimes in different words. He was very good at understanding and then relating back to it so that he didn't warp your argument or the thing you were trying to say. I also equally, independent of myself and not naming names, know some friends that the very reason they got into politics, the very reason they got involved, and the very reason in some ways their faith came to them, in a sense, that they came to the Lord, was because of Charlie Kirk and the pressure and the debates they saw where they either weren't able to rectify the points he was making and saw the truth of them, or in other ways saw how much that we as young men and others need to be involved in civil politics to protect our country. Charlie Kirk, on that, often said that when Americans stop debating ideas, violence becomes the next step. His death at the Utah Valley University may prove to be a turning point that he warned about, the moment many Americans finally see where political hatred leads us. Kirk believed the gospel held the key to solving America's problems. He spent his life proving that ideas matter more than ideology, that young people hunger for truth, and civil debate beats violent solutions. May his legacy remind us that in America, we settle differences with words, not bullets. May Charlie Kirk rest in peace with his Savior, and may justice be swift, and that the comfort of the Lord be with his family. And speaking of universities and the left, the search for BSU's next president moves closer to the state board narrowed over 50 candidates down to 5 finalists after 2 days of interviews. Board President Kirk and search committee chair David Turnbull conducted the interviews, though they haven't announced who has made the cut yet. As for why this matters, they're mainly at a crossroads. The question becomes, will the board choose someone who brings BSU back towards Idaho values, or they pick another progressive who ignores what taxpayers want? Remember, of course, lawmakers already cut BSU's budget by about $2 million because they were fed up with the university's leftward drift. The Big City Coffee lawsuit over about $5 million when BSU pushed out of business for supporting law enforcement. That's our own tax dollars being wasted on ideology instead of education. Idaho remains one of America's most conservative and religious states. Our legislature just had what observers called, quote, the most conservative legislative session in living memory, end quote. Yet, BSU continues to push diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that don't reflect our community's values. The 5 finalists, once announced, will face scrutiny from Idahoans, who want their largest university to serve our state's character, not advance a political agenda. The university needs a president who understands that education should teach truth and knowledge, not progressive dogma. This choice will show whether BSU returns to its educational mission or continues down the wrong path. You don't want to miss out on learning more about Idaho? If so, make sure to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss any of our future content and updates on these important stories. And speaking of another shooting, one that rattled Idaho more than the rest of the nation, Attorney General Rao Labrador announced this week that 4 Pocatello officers will not face criminal charges after they fatally shot 17-year-old Victor Perez in April. For context, if you don't remember the shooting, officers fired 14 bullets when they responded to a 911 call about someone threatening people with a knife. Victor, who had autism and cerebral palsy, was lying in a backyard holding a large kitchen knife when officers arrived. Body cam footage shows that within 12 seconds of commanding him to drop the weapon, officers opened fire as Victor stood and stepped toward the fence separating him from the officers. Labrador concluded that the officers acted within Idaho law. They didn't know Victor's age or disability and believed people were in danger. Under Idaho Code, you can find more details on this on our article, officers have no duty to retreat before using deadly force when reasonably believing someone possesses a threat of death or serious injury. The family's attorney disagrees, arguing officers should have retreated and could have recognized Victor's developmental disabilities. However, our state law clearly protects officers who make split-second decisions to protect lives while performing their duties. The case now moves to federal civil court, where the families pursue wrongful death claims. This reminds us how difficult law enforcement's job can be when responding to dangerous situations with limited information. And speaking of dangerous situations, over in eastern Idaho, a walking bridge collapsed at the Shoshone Ice Cave late last month, injuring 3 visitors on what should have been a routine cave tour. Emergency crews rushed to the scene on Saturday evening, August 31st, after getting a call just before 6 p.m. Early reports suggested about 20 people were trapped inside, but responders quickly found that that wasn't the case when they arrived. 3 people got hurt when the bridge gave way. 1 visitor suffered what appears to be a broken rib, while 2 others had minor injuries. All 3 went to the hospital for treatment, and cave management confirmed everyone received proper medical care. As for what caused the bridge to fail, investigators are still looking into it, but social media posts suggests a bolt may have given way on the walkway structure. That's concerning, but we're waiting for official findings to see if that's actually the case. The cave has closed temporarily while engineers examine the entire walkway system. Management made it clear they won't rush repairs or reopen until an engineer signs off on the work. As they put it, quote, safety is number one concern, not speed of repair, end quote. If If any of these stories are ones you haven't heard of and are glad you have, do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe/follow button. It helps us stay connected with you and reach more folks who love Idaho just like yourself. And like we hinted at the top of the show, major road projects across northern Idaho have ground to a halt after heavy equipment operators in Washington walked off their jobs on August 12th. The International Union of Operating Engineers Local 302 rejected contracts offers twice this summer, with 85% of members voting down proposals from contractors. 6 Idaho Transportation Department projects now face delays because of this, including the crucial I-90 widening between Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene. Bridge work has been hit the hardest. Girders from eastbound Coeur d'Alene River Bridge site are ready, but can't be installed without heavy crane operators. ITD warns that traffic may stay in its current crossover pattern through winter, making snow removal much harder. The Highway 53 Pleasant View Interchange project missed its railway coordination window, and the I-90/Highway 41 interchange improvements can't move forward. Time is running short, as you can guess, especially with the weather that they have up there. Asphalt plants typically shut down about October 31st, and weather-dependent bridge work needs to finish before winter arrives. ITD has performed emergency paving near Timberlake High School to keep traffic moving on Highway 54, though. Negotiators met September 3rd, but no deal emerged. While ITD expects the project to finish by 2026, individual milestones will likely push into next year. Our infrastructure depends on getting workers back to their jobs soon. And speaking of the pain train that this week kind of looks like it's going to be, and for a story we've been following for the last couple months and now have an answer on, the Meridian City Council voted 5 against, 1 for Tuesday night to reject In-N-Out's appeal for the proposed location near 10 Mile and Chinden. This marks the second rejection for what would have been our valley's 4th location. The Planning and Zoning Commission first denied it back in April, if you may remember, with some concerns. Despite In-N-Out making several concessions for that, shortening hours until midnight as we've talked about, better landscaping, and improved pedestrian walkways, council members weren't convinced. Their main worry, like most things here in the Treasure Valley, traffic. Council President Luke Kavener said it felt like they were trying to, quote, fit a very successful square peg into a very round hole, end quote. Local residents, especially from Bainbridge neighborhood, packed the meeting to voice their concerns about safety and congestion. They weren't opposed to In-N-Out itself, just this particular spot. Councilmember Doug Taylor cast the lone dissenting vote, arguing the company had done enough to address concerns. But his colleagues worried about the restaurant's regional draw, creating problems for nearby schools and residential areas. In-N-Out hasn't announced their next move, but they've indicated this was their preferred site for a second Meridian location, which kind of hints at them having another one. Has the show been valuable for you? Have you heard things that you wouldn't have heard otherwise about Idaho? If so, don't hesitate to share it. Your shares help us keep you and others informed about what's happening in Idaho. And speaking of the intersection of politics and religion, our very own Idaho Doug Wilson made waves in Washington last week, opening a new church just blocks from our nation's capital. The Moscow pastor drew impressive support from Trump's inner circle. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth attended the opening service, while Wilson shared the stage with cabinet members and congressmen at the National Conservatism Conference. Wilson told the packed Virginia venue that they planted the church to serve believers working in the Trump administration, not to chase important people, but to help important people meet God. This message resonated with 350 attendees, more than double their usual Sunday crowd. Love him or hate him, because, it's Doug Wilson, I get it, I don't agree with everything he has to say. His growing influence does signal something significant, and I think it is a small sign of something. Since Trump's return, we're seeing more people, both in politics and beyond, turning toward the gospel. I think we've all experienced that. Critics label Wilson as, quote, far right, but he's simply advocating, for most of his ideas in any way, ones that Christians held for centuries before 1960. At the conference, Wilson made his case for Christian nationalism, defending that America was founded as a deeply Christian and Protestant nation. These events represent fruit from the cultural shift happening in America. The ultimate question remains, what will this mean for our nation's future? Only time will tell, but the momentum is undeniable. And with all that said, I did put a little bit of an encouraging, a win here at the end, even though it's been a little bit of a downturner of a midweek report. Cracker Barrel, one of our beloved locations and mine, it has a special place in my heart, just proved that consumers still have power when they speak up. This Tuesday, the restaurant chain announced they'll suspend plans to remodel their locations after facing intense criticism from loyal fans. For those of you that may not have heard of this and have been living under a rock, the controversy with Cracker Barrel, don't worry, there's lots of rocks in Idaho, so I don't blame you. The backlash started 2 weeks ago when Cracker Barrel tried to modernize their iconic logo by removing the overall clad man leaning on the barrel, which, if you did know, is actually the owner and founder of Cracker Barrel. They changed it to something that looked a lot more like something that a 10-year-old would make in their computer in just an hour or two. Customers weren't having it, as you can guess. When people learned about the interior remodels on top of that, which featured bright lights, lighter painting, and much fewer antiques, a far more modernistic look, the outcry grew even louder. Only 4 of their 660 restaurants had received the makeover, but that was enough. The CEO had planned to transform 25 to 30 stores this year, and also went on public television saying that franchise owners were excited about it and everyone wanted a remodel, which we all know is not the case. Also claiming that the rebrand was to help with losing relevance. Now here is where the core of the issue comes through. Americans still value tradition and authenticity. We see that, you just need to go look at how well country music is selling. And this is antithetical to their brand. We don't want everything sanitized and modernized. We have so many things like that, like McDonald's and Burger Kings, and everything just seems to be getting this minimalist paint over. And also the very definition of Cracker Barrel is old. If you take the old out of Cracker Barrel, it's not Cracker Barrel anymore. Sometimes the old ways work because it connects us to something deeper than quarterly profits, our tradition and culture. When we drive past that familiar Cracker Barrel sign on I-84, we want to walk into some cozy, cluttered space our grandparents would recognize. Cracker Barrel listened to their customers, and that's exactly how businesses should operate. That said, thank you for listening to the entire report. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. Also, if you liked the Midweek Report, make sure to check out our other content on our website and social media. Also, if we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email or by tweeting us on Twitter at @LocalYokelIdaho. With the small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. Please be lifting up the Charlie Kirk family in your prayers, especially the wife. That's all for now, and I wish you a fantastic, blessed rest of your week. Godspeed.